The sun beat down harshly on the dusty village square, where a crowd had gathered like vultures circling a wounded soul. Among them stood Clara, her trembling arms wrapped protectively around her 3 small children, triplets barely 4 years old, whose wide, innocent eyes scanned the restless faces with confusion and fear. Her late husband's creditors stood tall and unrelenting, declaring that since her husband had died leaving an enormous debt, she and her children would now be taken as collateral by the man he owed the most, an arrogant landowner named Barrett Cross. Clara's pleas for mercy were met with jeers and callous indifference. She was being sold like cattle, her dignity trampled under the weight of greed and law twisted by power. Clara's husband, James, had been a good man but too trusting. He had borrowed money from Barrett to save the farm during a drought. But the rains never came, and the harvest never grew. When James died of a heart attack trying to keep everything afloat, Clara was left with nothing but the debt, and their children. With no male to defend her, the townsfolk stepped aside, whispering with pity but doing nothing. Just as Barrett stepped forward to claim her and the children, a quiet stillness fell over the crowd. A tall, weathered man stood at the edge, dressed in plain rancher clothes, dust coating his boots, his wide-brimmed hat shadowing a face rarely seen but never forgotten, Elias Ward. He was known simply as the Silent Rancher. No one knew much about him. He didn't speak unless he had to, didn't attend social events, and lived miles out on a remote ranch he built with his own hands. People said he had once lost his entire family in a barn fire and had never been the same. Elias slowly stepped forward, his boots crunching against the dry earth. Every eye turned to him. Even Barrett shifted uncomfortably. Elias didn't speak, not yet. He looked at Clara, whose eyes were filled with tears, shame, and fierce protectiveness. She clutched her children tighter, not knowing whether this man would offer help, or demand a price. Elias reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, leather pouch. Without a word, he walked up to Barrett and dropped it at his feet. A heavy clink echoed through the square, the unmistakable sound of gold coins. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Barrett narrowed his eyes. "What's this supposed to be?" Elias finally spoke, his voice deep, quiet, yet commanding. "Enough to settle her husband's debt. Every penny." Barrett's lip curled. "You can't just." "I just did," Elias interrupted calmly. "You want your money. There it is. She owes you nothing now." Barrett hesitated, clearly tempted by the weight of the gold. Greed won, as it often did. He picked up the pouch, counted it roughly, then spat on the ground. "Fine. She's free. But don't come crying when she's begging in the streets." With that, Barrett turned and stormed off, his pride wounded, his greed barely satisfied. Clara stood frozen. She looked at Elias, unsure whether to trust what had just happened. Her lips parted, but no words came. One of the triplets tugged on her skirt, whispering, "Mama, is the bad man gone?" Elias knelt in front of the child and smiled softly. "He's gone, little one. You're safe now." Clara's eyes welled with tears. Why would you do this for us?" Elias looked at her gently. "Because once, someone did it for me. I lost everything, my wife, my son, and no one cared. Then one day, a stranger gave me a chance to start again. Didn't ask for anything in return. Just said, pass it on when you can. Today, it's your turn." Clara covered her mouth, sobbing quietly as her knees gave way. Elias caught her gently. The crowd, which had once been silent in complicity, now watched in stunned reverence. A few wiped away tears. Some hung their heads in shame. A week later, Clara and her children moved to Elias's ranch, not as charity, but as partners. Elias had offered her a small cottage on the land and a chance to work. "Not out of pity," he had said, "but because I need good people, and your kids need a place to grow." The children brought laughter back to the ranch. Clara's warmth and strength brought healing into Elias's world. Slowly, the silent rancher smiled more. Spoke more. Laughed. And though neither said it out loud, love began to bloom between the widow who'd lost everything and the man who had once had nothing left. Word of Elias's act spread beyond the town. Others began helping those in need, quietly, selflessly, without reward. The moment had sparked something. It had shown that kindness doesn't always wear a cape or roar like thunder. Sometimes it stands in silence, speaks with gold instead of noise, and changes lives without asking for anything back. Years later, the town would remember the day a mother of triplets was nearly sold into bondage, and how one man's silent courage turned the tide. The children would grow up free, happy, and strong, forever telling the story of the quiet rancher who stood up when no one else would. And Clara, once broken by loss, would find hope not in being rescued, but in being seen, and given a chance to rise. In the end, it wasn't money that saved them. It was compassion. And that changed everything.